Picture this. A pregnant woman is dragged into the Colosseum, screaming, begging for mercy. The crowd goes silent, not out of horror, but anticipation. Within minutes, she's forced into a wooden contraption shaped like a cow, and a real bull is led toward her. This isn't mythology. This is Rome's twisted version of the Pasiphae legend, where a real human being was violated and killed, while 50,000 Romans cheered like it was just another Tuesday. And here's the sickest part. This wasn't even close to the most brutal thing that happened in that arena. Welcome to ancient Rome's most inhumane arena acts that went so far beyond entertainment, they make modern horror films look like children's cartoons. I'm talking about people burned alive while dressed as gods, prisoners fed to starving lions in naval battles staged on artificial oceans, and emperors so drunk on power they charged their own government to watch them slaughter disabled animals. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the Colosseum isn't a symbol of Roman greatness. It's a monument to humanity's darkest instincts. And trust me, what I'm about to show you will change how you see ancient history forever. Let's start with something that'll turn your stomach. The morning executions weren't just killings, they were theater. Convicted criminals were forced to reenact famous myths, except the deaths were real. A man playing Icarus was hoisted on mechanical wings, then dropped onto a pit of starving bears. A thief portraying Prometheus was chained to a rock, while vultures, real vultures, were released to peck at his liver. The myth says Prometheus was immortal and suffered forever. This guy, he lasted maybe 20 minutes of unimaginable agony before bleeding out. The Roman poet Martial documented one particular execution where a bandit named Laureolus was crucified on stage. Then an eagle and a bear were released to tear him apart while he was still nailed to the cross. The crowd erupted in applause. To them, it wasn't murder. It was artistic interpretation. But here's where it gets worse. The Romans didn't just kill randomly. They engineered psychological torture. Prisoners were told they'd fight for their freedom, given wooden swords, then sent against fully armed gladiators. The crowd laughed as these desperate souls swung useless weapons, realizing too late they'd been set up for slaughter. It was comedy to the Romans, a sick joke where the punchline was always death. Some prisoners were even dressed in ridiculous costumes, clown outfits, or women's clothing, to maximize the humiliation before their inevitable execution. The audience didn't just want death, they wanted degradation, suffering wrapped in mockery. And before we go deeper into this nightmare, understand this. Everything you're about to hear is documented historical fact. Roman historians, philosophers, and poets wrote about these events. Archaeological evidence confirms the brutality. This isn't exaggeration. This is what one of history's greatest civilizations called entertainment. Now let's talk about the animal hunts, or as they called them, venationes. You might think, okay, lions versus criminals. Brutal but straightforward. Wrong. The Romans didn't just release animals. They starved them for days, sometimes weeks, until they were so feral they'd attack anything that moved. Archaeological digs around the Colosseum have found animal bones with signs of deliberate malnutrition, proof that Rome weaponized hunger itself. The animals weren't just props. They were torture devices with teeth and claws, driven mad by starvation and confined in darkness until the moment they were released into blinding sunlight and deafening noise. The logistics behind these hunts were staggering and horrifying in their own right. Beneath the Colosseum lay the hypogeum, an underground network of 32 animal chambers connected by tunnels and equipped with 80 vertical elevator shafts. Imagine spending weeks trapped in a pitch black cage, barely larger than your body, hearing other animals screaming around you, the smell of death everywhere, being poked with spears and torches to keep you aggressive. Then suddenly, a trapdoor opens. You're thrust upward on a pulley system into blinding light, and 50,000 people are screaming at you while a terrified human is tied to a post in front of you. The animals didn't just kill, they killed in a state of complete panic and rage, which made the deaths even more unpredictable and horrifying for the audience. At the inauguration of the Colosseum in 80 AD, Emperor Titus killed over 9,000 animals in just 100 days. Let that number sink in. 90 animals slaughtered every single day for over 3 months straight. Lions, elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, hippos, leopards, bears, bulls, panthers, even ostriches were shipped from across the empire, caged, tortured, and butchered for applause. And get this, the first giraffe ever seen in Europe? Julius Caesar had it torn apart in the arena, because why not? If Rome could capture the strangest beast alive, it could destroy it just as easily. The message wasn't subtle. Rome controlled not just people and armies, but nature itself. Every exotic animal that died in the sand was proof that the empire's reach extended to the ends of the earth. But animals weren't just victims, they were executioners. In a practice called damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, prisoners were stripped naked, tied to posts, or crucified on crosses, and left defenseless as lions, bears, or leopards were released. And here's what most people don't understand. The deaths weren't quick. Big cats don't kill instantly. They're ambush predators designed to maul, to toy with their prey, to drag it down slowly. A single execution could last 30 minutes or more of screaming, thrashing horror while vendors sold wine and roasted nuts in the stands, while parents brought their children to watch, while couples held hands and made bets on how long the victim would last. Some prisoners were so terrified of this fate that they committed suicide before reaching the arena. Historical records document men choking themselves with the sponges used to clean latrines, smashing their own heads against cell walls, or deliberately provoking guards to kill them quickly rather than face the beasts. The philosopher Seneca wrote about witnessing a German prisoner who, while being transported to the arena, shoved his head between the spokes of a moving cartwheel and let it break his neck. He chose self-inflicted death over the spectacle Rome had planned for him. And here's the thing. This wasn't hidden in dungeons. This was prime time entertainment. Middle of the day, scheduled like a TV show. The morning featured beast hunts. Midday brought the executions. Afternoon delivered the main event, gladiatorial combat. Rome had mastered the art of making suffering routine, of training an entire population to view human death as casual, as watching street performers. Now, if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about the Naumachii, the mock naval battles. This is where Roman engineering met absolute insanity. Imagine this. Julius Caesar orders a massive lake dug near the Tiber River, fills it with water, using redirected streams, and forces thousands of prisoners onto full-sized warships, not toy boats, actual military vessels, equipped with battering rams, catapults, and armed marines. These aren't reenactors in costumes. They're condemned men, criminals, prisoners of war. given real weapons, and told to fight to the death, while 100,000 spectators watch from the banks. Ships rammed each other with bone-crushing force. Men drowned in armor too heavy to swim in. Arrows flew. Flaming projectiles ignited sails. Blood turned entire sections of water red. And when it was over, the survivors weren't freed. They were executed anyway, because the whole point wasn't victory, or skill, or courage. The point was death. The point was showing that Rome could stage war itself as entertainment. Augustus, Caesar's heir, expanded the madness. He constructed a basin nearly 1,800 feet long, requiring the construction of a dedicated aqueduct, the Aqua Alsiatina, just to keep it filled with water. 30 full warships participated in his naumachia, each crammed with condemned men. Historical estimates suggest around 3,000 people fought in a single afternoon, with casualty rates approaching 90%. The engineering alone was remarkable. The brutality was unprecedented, and the crowd loved every second of it. Even natural landscapes weren't safe from Rome's appetite for spectacle. In 52 AD, Emperor Claudius staged a naumachia on Lake Fucine using 19,000 condemned prisoners organized into two fleets representing ancient naval battles. Before the carnage began, the prisoners raised their hands toward the emperor's viewing platform and spoke words that would echo through history. Morituri te salutant. Those who are about to die salute you. Whether it was spontaneous or rehearsed, scripted or genuine, the phrase captured the absolute fatalism of men forced into death as entertainment, men who knew with certainty that the day would end with their corpses floating in bloody water. But Rome didn't stop with water. The Colosseum itself could be flooded for smaller-scale naval displays. Engineers designed sophisticated drainage systems that could fill the arena floor with several feet of water, allowing miniature fleets to clash before being drained for gladiatorial combat the next day. The same sand that soaked up human blood in the afternoon had been a battlefield for ships in the morning. Even in architecture, Rome engineered cruelty as if it were just another performance art, another way to demonstrate absolute mastery over the elements. And speaking of engineering death, let's talk about fire. The tunica molesta, the shirt of pain, or the tunic of torment, was a garment soaked in pitch, resin, or animal fat, then strapped onto a condemned prisoner before being set ablaze. Victims became human torches, stumbling, screaming, their skin bubbling and melting while the crowd roared its approval. Sometimes these fiery executions were framed as mythology. Hercules, consumed by his poisoned shirt, or Mucius Scaevola, proving his loyalty by voluntarily burning his own hand. But these weren't actors with special effects. They were real people, writhing in flames, their screams mixing with the smell of burning flesh, dying slowly for entertainment. The Emperor Nero took this to grotesque extremes. After the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, he blamed the Christians for the disaster, despite widespread belief that he'd started it himself. His punishment? He had Christians sewn into animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified, and many were turned into human torches, lined along his garden paths at night to illuminate his parties while he rode through in a chariot. Admiring the spectacle, the historian Tacitus, no friend to Christians, even admitted the executions were so cruel they generated public sympathy for the victims. When Tacitus, a man who casually documented the slaughter of barbarian tribes, says something went too far. You know it crossed a line most Romans didn't even know existed. But if you want to see true madness, look at the emperors themselves and how they weaponized the arena for personal vanity. Caligula once ran out of condemned prisoners mid-show. His solution? He ordered guards to drag random spectators from their seats and throw them to the lions. People who came to watch executions became participants without warning, without trial, without any crime except being in the wrong seat when the emperor got bored. No trial, no justification, just death because Caligula felt like it. The arena became a lottery where your ticket to entertainment might become your death sentence. Then there's Commodus, the emperor who thought he was Hercules incarnate. This man was so delusional, so obsessed with his own image, that he entered the arena dressed in a lion skin and wielding a club, claiming to reenact the hero's legendary labors. He slaughtered hundreds of animals. But here's the catch. Most were already disabled, either crippled beforehand or tied down to guarantee his victory. He'd shoot arrows at ostriches from a safe platform, then parade around the arena holding up their severed heads like trophies. The crowd was forced to cheer. Senators were required to shout his praises, and he charged the Roman treasury a gladiator's fee for every single appearance, literally bankrupting the state while forcing everyone to worship his manufactured courage. The historical accounts get even more disturbing. Commodus once killed 100 bears in a single day, using arrows and spears, all from a protected platform. He'd fight gladiators, but only with blunted weapons, while his opponents used even duller blades, or none at all. The matches were staged jokes, where the outcome was predetermined. One recorded incident describes him killing an ostrich, then approaching the senator's section, holding the bird's severed head and a bloody sword, silently threatening anyone who didn't show sufficient enthusiasm. And if you didn't clap loud enough, you might be next. Nero was arguably even worse, though in a different way. He didn't just execute prisoners, he turned their deaths into theatrical productions, with himself as director. Prisoners dressed as tragic characters from Greek plays were killed in ways that matched their roles. A man playing Icarus was set ablaze mid-air and dropped into a sandpit. A woman cast as Dirce was tied to a bull and dragged until her body broke apart. Another prisoner reenacting the death of Orpheus was torn apart by bears, except unlike the myth, these bears weren't enchanted by music. They were starved and enraged. Nero called it art. Philosophers called it depravity. History calls it the logical conclusion of a culture that normalized cruelty. And this obsession with spectacle wasn't limited to mad emperors. Even supposedly good rulers participated. Trajan, often praised as one of Rome's 5 good emperors, marked his victory over Dacia with 123 consecutive days of games. Think about that. 4 straight months of daily killing. The celebrations included over 10,000 gladiators fighting and an uncounted number of executions. Thousands of prisoners from the Dacian Wars were paraded through the streets, then systematically slaughtered in the arena while Romans cheered their emperor's military success. The games weren't just entertainment, they were propaganda, a vivid reminder that defying Rome meant not just defeat, but public, humiliating death designed to terrify anyone else considering rebellion. But not everyone cheered when the gates opened. For some Romans, The arena was less a triumph of civilization than a symptom of its moral rot. The philosopher Seneca openly admitted the games disturbed him. After attending midday executions, he wrote, "I come home more greedy, more ambitious, more cruel, and inhuman, because I have been among human beings." To him, the arena didn't purge society's darkness, it amplified it, training citizens to treat human suffering as casual amusement, as something to bet on, laugh at, and then forget over dinner. Cicero, decades earlier, had hinted at similar unease. While he praised bravery in combat, he condemned cruelty for cruelty's sake, writing that watching needless suffering degraded both the victim and the viewer. Yet even he recognized the political necessity of sponsoring games, confessing that the masses demanded them as proof of a magistrate's generosity and fitness for office. His dilemma captured Rome's paradox perfectly. To be moral was to be seen as weak. To rule effectively meant feeding the crowd's insatiable appetite for blood. Virtue and power had become incompatible. Early Christians saw the arena as both persecution and ultimate test of faith. Men and women who refused to renounce their religion were burned, crucified, or thrown to beasts. Their deaths turned into public entertainment specifically designed to humiliate their beliefs. The Christian writer Tertullian condemned the games as demonic, calling them seedbeds of cruelty, where humanity's worst impulses were cultivated and celebrated. For Christians, every cheer from the stands was a reminder that Rome's empire was built on the systematic inversion of justice and mercy. The critics weren't wrong about the costs. Economically, the games drained treasuries. By the late empire, emperors bankrupted themselves, trying to stage spectacles large enough to compete with their predecessors. What once symbolized strength became a sign of desperation, a way to buy temporary loyalty in an empire struggling to hold itself together. The satirist Juvenal mocked this dependency with his famous phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. To him, the crowd's hunger for free food and constant entertainment revealed how far Rome had drifted from its republican roots, from citizen soldiers who valued duty to passive consumers who valued distraction. Culturally, the obsession with spectacle dulled Rome's resilience. Citizens who once celebrated military discipline and civic virtue now demanded only cheap bread and endless games. The arena became a substitute for genuine civic engagement, a way to keep the masses pacified while the empire slowly crumbled. As resources dwindled and frontiers collapsed, the ability to stage grand spectacles faltered. Amphitheaters fell into disrepair. The roars of lions were replaced with the silence of abandonment. By the 5th century, when barbarian invasions shattered the empire's core, the Colosseum itself stood as a hollow shell, still imposing architecturally, but stripped of its bloody voice. Yet the moral questions never faded. Could a society that normalized cruelty, that trained children from birth to view torture as entertainment, that rewarded leaders for inventing new forms of suffering, truly endure? The philosophers thought not, and in hindsight, the games seemed less like a celebration of Roman power than a warning about how quickly human dignity can be traded for applause, how easily a civilization can convince itself that barbarism is culture when wrapped in spectacle and tradition. The Colosseum still stands today, its arches weathered by time, its seats emptied of spectators, but the ghosts of its sand linger in every stone. When you walk through its tunnels, you can almost hear the echoes, the clash of iron on iron, the roar of beasts driven mad by starvation, the cheers of 50,000 voices rising as one to celebrate suffering. It's easy to admire the engineering, the architectural grandeur, the sheer ambition of the structure. Much harder, but infinitely more honest, is to remember what those stones were built for. Cruelty rehearsed and repeated until it became ordinary, death industrialized and packaged as civic duty. Rome's arenas were never just about blood and death. They were about control, about power, about shaping how an entire civilization thought and felt. By turning death into entertainment, the empire trained its citizens to see suffering as spectacle, to cheer obedience, to laugh at despair, and to accept that some lives simply didn't matter. Every execution, every animal hunt, every staged myth reinforced the idea that Rome's power was limitless, that it could command not just men and armies, but the very meaning of life and death itself. And that's the lasting lesson the Colosseum teaches us. It reminds us not only of Rome's brilliance in engineering and organization, but also of its profound moral blindness. A society that glorified violence, that turned suffering into art, that measured greatness by how creatively it could kill, eventually crumbled under its own weight. The empire that conquered the known world couldn't conquer the darkness it cultivated in its own heart, and it left behind ruins that tell a story both awe inspiring and deeply cautionary. So here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to acknowledge. The same instincts that filled those seats, the hunger for spectacle, the thrill of watching someone else suffer, the need to feel powerful by witnessing powerlessness, those instincts didn't disappear when Rome fell. They just found new arenas, new justifications, new ways to convince ourselves that certain cruelties are acceptable when packaged correctly. The faces change, the technology advances, but the fundamental impulse remains. So, what do you think? Which of these acts disturbed you the most? Was it the Pasiphae reenactments, where real people were violated and killed? The human torches lighting Nero's gardens? The mock naval battles, where thousands drowned for entertainment? The animal hunts that drove entire species to extinction? Or the emperors who turned murder into personal vanity projects? Let me know in the comments below, because understanding this darkness is the first step to making sure we never repeat it. And if this video opened your eyes to history's darkest corners, hit that subscribe button. We're diving deeper into the stories they don't teach in schools, the uncomfortable truths that challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations. Because trust me, Rome's horrors are just the beginning. There's an entire world of buried history waiting to be uncovered, and some of it will shake you to your core. Until next time, remember, the Colosseum may be silent now, but the echoes of its cruelty still whisper warnings to anyone willing to listen.